I remember the first time I walked down the old country road at night, long before the streetlights had been fixed. The fog was so thick it seemed to swallow my footsteps, and every tree cast shadows that shifted like living things. A faint humming vibrated under my skin, low and unsteady, coming from somewhere deep in the forest beyond the houses. I felt the air thicken, heavy with something I couldn't name. My breath came out in pale clouds that lingered longer than they should have, curling into shapes that almost looked like faces. I paused, thinking I'd imagine the whisper of rustling behind me, but the sound only grew sharper. Somewhere off to my left, a faint flicker of light danced between the branches, like someone, no, something, was watching me. I told myself it was just my eyes playing tricks, the town's abandoned lanterns swaying in the wind. But the feeling of being followed, of being studied, clung to me. Every instinct screamed to turn around, but my legs didn't obey. I took one more careful step forward, and then I saw it, a figure, pale and impossibly still, at the edge of the fog. I never should have walked closer, but something in me had to know who, or what, it was. That's when I saw it. The edge of town smelled of wet asphalt and pine. A chill pressed against my skin, soft but insistent. The streetlights faded behind me, swallowed by shadows. I walked past the last mailbox. The road ended, but the forest didn't. A low hum vibrated through the air, subtle at first, like something deep beneath the earth, thrumming, patient. The pines leaned closer than they should have. Shadows twisted around the trunks, curling, stretching, as if the trees themselves were alive, watching. A shiver ran across my shoulders. I stopped, and the hum swelled just enough to press against my ribs. A pale light floated through the branches. It wasn't bright, just enough to make the fog shimmer. It moved slowly, like a moth hesitating before a flame. I could feel the mist settle on my eyelashes, cool and damp. I caught it then. Something small, a shape almost hidden in the fog. Indistinct, wrong somehow. It was there, and then it wasn't. The air where it had been seemed hollow, like a held breath. Every step I took made the forest breathe around me. Leaves rustled without wind. Twigs cracked softly underfoot. I wondered if I had made the noise, or if the forest did on its own. The hum vibrated again, rising, wrapping to the trees and under my skin. It was neither loud nor threatening, just persistent. A lullaby for something I couldn't see. The fog pressed thicker between the trunks. I could barely see my hands. And still, the pale light drifted untethered. It moved like it had memory, like it remembered me before I even arrived. A shadow flickered. Not a shadow of myself. Something in the corner of my vision, slipping behind the tree trunks. I blinked. Nothing. Just the hum, rolling through the forest like a tide. I felt my heart beat in my throat. But the hum stayed, indifferent. I breathed slowly, tasting damp earth and cold resin. The forest held me, silent and patient. A branch snapped above me, soft, gentle, almost deliberate. I froze, and in that pause, I thought I saw movement. The small shape again, retreating, or maybe I imagined it. The pines swayed subtly, casting long fingers of shadow across the fog. The light bobbed once, twice, then drifted higher, fading into nothing. And just like that, the forest exhaled. The hum lingered in my ears. It wasn't gone. It waited, pulsing quietly beneath my skin. I turned back toward town. The streetlights waited like distant stars. The air smelled sweeter there, though it carried the memory of pine. I kept walking. The forest breath followed, and I knew somehow it would always be there, waiting. The street was empty. Fog clung low to the ground, curling around the cracked pavement like smoke. The lamps were pale and tired, their light trembling in the cold night air. I could hear it before I saw anything, soft at first, then sharper. Footsteps. Behind me. They weren't my own. I paused. The echoes lingered, bouncing off the shuttered windows of the houses. Closer. I turned. Nothing. Just a faint shimmer of broken glass, reflecting the flickering light. The houses stood silent, as if waiting. Yet, the footsteps didn't stop. Closer. Measured. Impossible. A door creaked somewhere on my left. No wind. No one. The rusting hinge sang into the still night. I swallowed. The air smelled damp like earth after rain. And smoke. Or maybe it was the fog mixing with something else. Something metallic. I walked on. Footsteps followed, rhythm matching mine. Faster, slower, then gone. I stopped, held my breath. A static whisper filled my ears, soft, almost friendly, then sharp. It scratched at the edges of my thoughts. A word, or just noise? I couldn't tell. The streetlight above me flickered. Shadows jumped, folding over themselves. I saw a shape, or thought I did, sliding behind a corner. A figure that dissolved before I could blink. The houses watched. Their broken windows were like eyes. Faint glimmers that followed every step. I tried to ignore it. Told myself the footsteps were my imagination. But the smell of rust was stronger here. Stronger than anywhere else. Something had been bleeding into the night. Somewhere close, somewhere unseen. Another door groaned open. Closer now. The sound of hollow wood sliding on stone. I didn't move. I didn't dare. But I could feel someone or something shifting just at the edge of my vision. I turned sharply. Nothing. Only a shadow lingering in the fog. It melted into the darkness as if I'd imagined it. My heart thudded. Slow at first, then wild. The footsteps returned. Around me. Inside me. Echoing down the empty street. I stepped forward, careful. Each footfall echoed back. The hum of the night wrapped around me. Soft and heavy. The fog pressed against my skin. Moist. Cold. The whispers returned. Closer this time. The words were fragments. Pieces of thoughts I couldn't grasp. Don't move. Or maybe it was come. I wasn't sure. I passed an abandoned house. The window flickered. A pale light. It wasn't electricity. It didn't feel right. Something inside me knew eyes were watching. I could almost see them. Silent. Still. Waiting. Another pause. The street fell into silence. I didn't breathe. The fog thickened. My skin prickled under its weight. And then, a soft footstep behind me. Closer than before. Too close. I turned, slowly, dread curling in my chest. Nothing. Only the street. Empty. The wind picked up briefly. Rustling leaves along the sidewalk. But no wind should have moved those doors, those shadows. I wasn't alone. I could feel it pressing closer. The flickering light stilled. The fog thinned. Silence stretched out like a long breath. I kept walking. Step by step, the street unwound behind me. Footsteps faded. But I didn't turn again. I didn't want to see. The town was still asleep. But I knew better that I wasn't alone. Not really. The street was empty. Fog curled low around the cracked sidewalks. Autumn had left the air thin and biting that I noticed it then. A pale flicker, far above the boarded windows of the old house. A single lantern, swinging, though the board should have blocked every breath of wind. Each step toward it fell heavier. Leaves rustled, but the sound was hollow, distant, as if someone or something was listening. The lantern shifted, tilting like a slow heartbeat, and the shadows in the corners of the house stretched unnaturally that I stopped. The wooden boards groaned, not from the wind, from inside. There was a shape behind the upstairs window. At first, just a shadow, thin and wavering. Then a reflection caught me. Something pale, almost translucently so, staring back. My breath came in shallow bursts. The cold bit deeper. I could feel eyes tracing every inch of me. Soft footsteps, maybe mine, maybe not, whispered against the broken porch boards. The lantern trembled. Shadows twisted across the peeling walls. They grew longer, thinner, stretching down toward me, though I had not moved. A low hum seemed to press against my ears, rhythmic, patient, like a pulse. I leaned closer to the window, drawn despite the tightening in my chest. The reflection flickered again. This time, I could make out a face. Too pale, too empty, lips parted in a silence that sounded louder than words. And the eyes that held a stillness I couldn't place. The boards under my fingers felt alive. Warmth, cold, a vibration that traveled from wood to skin, then vanished. Something shifted behind the curtains. I wanted to look, to see more, but the urge died under the weight of dread. A gust of wind shook the lantern. Its light pulsed, then dimmed, then shone again. Shadows danced faster now, like they had begun noticing me. I stepped back instinctively, heart stammering, breath caught in my throat. I could smell something faint, metallic, old wood, rust, something deeper, almost like memory. The house exhaled around me, slow, deliberate, and I realized I had never truly been outside, or perhaps that I had never truly been alone. I felt it then, a presence hovering at the edge of perception, watching, waiting, not moving, but moving all the same. The lantern dipped once, then steadied. The reflection vanished, leaving only darkness behind the glass. The wind ceased. The street became utterly silent. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to look away. But the instinct to step back was stronger than curiosity. The last thing I saw before turning was a lantern. Its flame burned calmly, yet somehow aware, as if it had been waiting just for me. I walked away slowly. The fog swallowed my footsteps. The house receded into shadow, yet the lantern remained unwavering in the upstairs window, and I felt, even from here, its eyes on me. The field smelled of damp earth and hay. Mist hovered low, curling around my boots like it wanted to follow me. I could hear the wind, soft, almost thoughtful, moving through the old barn's timbers. I hadn't meant to come this far. The barn stood there, hollow and leaning, shadows pooling at its edges. And then the whisper, my name, soft, almost lost in the hum of the evening. I stopped, heart quieted, and then skipped. Again, my name, carried on the wind, curling like smoke. I couldn't tell which way it came from. The door, it moved, slowly, groaning, swinging open. I stepped closer. Fog swallowed the threshold. Inside, darkness pressed against me, thicker than the night. It smelled of old wood and something colder, sharper, lingering just on the surface. I reached for the frame. Fingers met ice. Frost. A breath that wasn't mine touched my neck. I froze. The hairs on my arms lifted. The whisper came again. Closer this time. Almost a sigh. Almost a warning. I wanted to turn. I wanted to run. But something drew me in. A shadow moved behind a beam, just beyond the pale light slipping through cracks. It was too fast to see clearly. Too slow to ignore. The air changed. Heavy now, pressing. Rustling, soft, like paper brushing against skin. I thought I saw movement in the corner, but it could have been fog. Could have been the barn itself shifting. A cold line traced my spine. Frost settled along my shoulder, disappearing before I could understand it. The whispers were all around now. My name, not loud but persistent. Inviting, threatening. I stumbled toward the door. The floorboards groaned under me, complaining with each step. And then silence. The whispers vanished. The air held only the cold and the faint smell of hay. I pressed my hands to the door, pushing, but it didn't move. Not entirely. The barn seemed to breathe. A shadow lingered at the corner of my vision, vanishing whenever I tried to look straight at it. The fog outside shifted, the night stretching, swallowing shapes into itself. A soft breeze caressed my cheek. It could have been wind, or it could have been something else. I couldn't tell. I felt it brush past me again, warmer this time, almost tender. Frost clung to my skin where it had touched. A fleeting touch, leaving only the memory of cold. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. The barn held me in place. Quiet, waiting. I don't know how long I stood there. The whispers didn't return, only the soft creak of the door, swinging slightly in the wind. Only the smell of damp earth, old hay, and cold that refused to leave. I turned, walked away. The field swallowed my footprints, the fog curling back into itself. Behind me, the barn waited, and I knew, without looking, it would be listening. The night smelled of wet asphalt. Fog curled around the streetlights, soft and pale. My breath floated in the air, catching in the quiet. I walked, one foot after the other, the rhythm familiar, soothing. Then the air shifted. A chill sank into my chest, deep enough to touch my bones. The hum began, low, steady, almost alive. Every other noise retreated. Distant cars, a dog barking, even the whisper of the wind. It was only the hum now, vibrating in my teeth under my skin. I stopped. The chill pulled around my feet, climbing. It pressed against my legs, a frozen weight. My hands tingled, stiffening the cold. I glanced at the sidewalk. Shadows stretched long under the weak light, and there a figure, pale, as if the light itself had shunned it, partially hidden behind a tree, yet perfectly still. My heart slowed, then skipped. The instinct to move, to run, collided with a heavier force that kept me planted. The static hum filled my ears, swallowing thoughts. I tried to breathe, but the cold pulled at my lungs. I could see it more clearly now, a blur of gray and white, too pale to be human, too still to be alive. I blinked. It had not moved, not a twitch. The leaves rustled softly above, but no wind stirred them. A smell, damp, earthy but sharp, hit my nose. It smelled like wet roots and something else I couldn't name. I swallowed. My throat had gone dry. The streetlight flickered. Shadows danced around the figure, but it remained, watching, waiting. I tried to step backward. My feet met a wall of cold, pressing against them, rooting me. The hum thickened, closer, louder, vibrating through my chest. And then I realized the figure wasn't alone. Shadows shifted beside it, soft, slow, curling like smoke or mist. They moved, almost imperceptibly, against the night. I wanted to turn, to flee, but my body betrayed me. A sound, faint, almost inaudible, brushed my ear. A whisper? A sigh? I couldn't tell. The hum drowned it, yet it left a mark, cold and hollow in my mind. The figure's head tilted, a slow, deliberate motion, heavy and impossible, and I felt it, watching, knowing, patient. The air tightened around me. My pulse throbbed in my ears, matching the hum. I forced a step forward. The cold recoiled slightly, as if noticing. I could see the mist swirl, small eddies curling around the figure's feet. Each movement, slow and deliberate, dragging the shadows with it. A part of me screamed to run. Another whispered to stay, to understand. I listened to the hum. It hummed of memory, of places I had never been, of cold touches against skin I had never felt. The figure leaned further from the tree, its edges blurred against the fog. I wanted to look away, to blink it out of existence, but something inside kept me fixed, staring. The streetlight buzzed, low and uneasy, and for a heartbeat, everything went quiet. The hum paused. The cold lifted an inch, and then it was back, stronger, more insistent. I turned my head. Nothing moved but the fog. The figure had not left. It lingered, a silent sentinel, pale and patient. I started walking again, feet dragging, every step heavier than the last. The chill followed. The hum followed. And behind me, I felt it watching, waiting for the moment I would look back. I didn't. I couldn't. Only the fog and the quiet. Only the hum, deep in my bones. And the shadow of something waiting. The air was damp. Autumn had already begun to curl the edges of leaves outside. The house sagged on its own foundation, as if it had been holding its breath for years. I stepped over the threshold. The wooden floor groaned under me, each creak lingering longer than it should. Dust motes floated like tiny lanterns in the pale light from the broken window. The hallway stretched ahead, shadow pooling in the corners. I moved slowly, almost afraid to disturb the silence. My fingers brushed the peeling wallpaper, rough and damp. A narrow staircase led up to the attic. The air above smelled of old wood and something faintly metallic. Each step I took seemed to echo in rhythm of my own heartbeat. At the top, the room was small, suffocated by years of neglect. Boxes lined the walls, and the floor sagged where water had seeped through the roof. In the far corner, a mirror leaned against the wall, draped in a thick layer of dust. I approached it, brushing away the grime with a trembling hand. The glass reflected me, pale and uncertain. But then I noticed it. My reflection lagged, just slightly at first, like a delayed echo. I raised a hand. The mirror hesitated before copying me. A cold shiver crawled down my spine. I leaned closer, eyes narrowing. The air felt heavier here, thick like fog trapped in a jar. The faint hum of the house seemed to press against my ears. I moved back a step, watching the reflection move behind me. It wasn't perfectly synchronized anymore. Something flickered, a shape, pale and hesitant, forming behind me. I turned quickly. The corner of the attic was empty. Only dust motes drifted lazily in the dim light. The quiet pressed against my chest. I swallowed hard, trying to calm the sudden thrum of fear. The mirror called me in some silent way, urging me closer. Every footstep toward it felt heavier, like moving through water. The shadow lingered in the reflection. A face, or maybe the suggestion of one, blurred and shifting. It moved closer when I paused, retreating when I blinked. I could feel it watching, even though the attic remained empty. A gust of wind rattled the broken window. It carried the smell of wet leaves and decayed wood. The candlelight from the street outside flickered across the walls, twisting the shadows. For a moment, I thought I heard soft breathing behind me. I spun again. Nothing. But the reflection, my reflection, had tilted its head slightly. It smiled. Just a hint, like the memory of a smile I had never worn. I stumbled back, fingers clawing at the edge of the mirror. The glass felt cold, almost alive beneath my touch. I couldn't tear my eyes away. I couldn't move. The air thickened. It smelled faintly of iron, and the hairs on my arms stood on end. The reflection reached a hand out, but mine stayed still, frozen. The space behind me in the attic stretched, darkening, like it had room for something more. I whispered, though I wasn't sure if anyone would hear. "Who's there?" No answer. Only the subtle shift in the mirror, the way it waited. The shadow trembled, then vanished, leaving only me reflected accurately for a heartbeat, then lagging again. I backed toward the staircase, dragging my eyes from the glass. The attic seemed to sigh, wooden beams creaking like slow, deliberate breaths. I could feel the mirror's presence, patient and hungry. Each step down was slower than the last. The dust settled behind me, like a cloud I couldn't escape. A soft draft whispered around my ankles, carrying a faint scent of the unknown. I reached the hallway and paused, heart hammering. The house felt older now, heavier, as if it had been waiting just for me. The mirror remained behind, silent and still, reflecting nothing but the pale light. I left the house with the door groaning shut behind me. Outside, the autumn wind carried away the smell of dust and decay. The street was empty, yet I felt watched. That night in my own room, I caught movement in a reflective surface. A lag, subtle, a shadow behind me that wasn't there. And I realized the mirror hadn't stopped following. The street was empty. Fog lay heavy over the cracked pavement. The lamplight flickered, pale and weak, against the autumn dusk. I walked slowly, my shoes dragging over scattered leaves. A chill crept along my arms. Even though the air was still, every breath I took tasted faintly of wet stone and smoke. The houses leaned, silent and tired. One stood out. Its windows were fractured, the glass jagged like teeth. And behind one, I thought I saw her. A pale face. A girl. Her eyes glinted in the fading light. Too bright. Too knowing. I froze. The fog pressed close around me, wet and whispering. Soft footsteps, or maybe my own, rustled against the dead leaves. The street seemed to breathe in, then exhale a hollow, laughing sigh. Her lips parted slightly. A sound, no, more a ripple of echo, slipped from the broken window. A faint, brittle laughter, the kind that clings to the edges of your memory, and then vanishes before you can place it. I tried to step closer. The wood of the porch groaned under invisible weight. Every shadow wavered, stretching toward me, and I could almost smell the faint sweetness of something decaying. Her eyes didn't blink. She was watching me, or perhaps waiting. A wind picked up, not cold but insistent. It carried whispers, syllables too soft to understand. Leaves skittered across the street like restless fingers. I wanted to speak. The words died in my throat. The fog thickened, clinging to my ankles, to my chest. I felt the street lean closer, the houses breathing, the ground pulsing. The girl moved, or maybe the shadow of her moved. It shifted with the cracked glass, as if the window itself remembered her. I stepped back. The laughter rose again, layered and distant. It was behind me, beside me, Everywhere I wasn't, the autumn air felt wet with eyes I could not see. A sigh brushed my ear, soft, almost regretful, and then silence. The street remained empty. The fog swallowed the cracked windows, but in the deepest corners, I felt her gaze linger, a presence not quite tied to the world. A girl who had never left. I walked on, leaves crunching under my feet, but the echo of her laughter stayed, wrapped around the hush of the night, waiting for me to look back. And when I did, even from a distance, I thought I saw her there, pale and still, watching, always watching. The porch sagged under the weight of years, would groan in the fog, cold and damp against my palms. I had come for quiet, for the kind of silence that presses into your chest. A small radio rested beside me. Its surface was pale, scratched. I turned the dial. Static, soft at first, like a sigh curling through the air. Then voices. They whispered. Fragments of things I shouldn't know. Names I didn't recognize. Things I hadn't thought about, not for years. I shivered. The air tasted faintly of rust and wet leaves. Somewhere deep inside, a hum began to thrum. Not from the radio. Not entirely. I leaned closer. The voices twisted, murmuring like they were tangled in the fog. Every so often, a word stabbed clear through the haze. Alone, watching, don't move. I froze. The porch boards creaked under the ghost of my own weight. A breath brushed my neck. Or maybe it was only the wind. And then I saw them. Footprints in the dust. Small, shallow impressions, fresh as if pressed by bare skin. They appeared slowly, one after the other, circling me. I looked around. Nothing moved. Nothing alive. The static buzzed louder, like it wanted to speak in full sentences. I felt the hum under my ribs, vibrating through my bones. The fog thickened, curling over the railings, over my legs. I couldn't tell where the porch ended and the darkness began. My hand shook as I reached for the radio. The dial spun under my fingers, resisting. Whispers coiled around my ears, soft and impossible. Look deeper beneath. I tried to follow them with my eyes. The footprints paused at the edge of the porch. Then they retraced themselves, vanishing into the dust. I swallowed. The silence that followed tasted like ash. A pale light hovered beyond the yard, flickering. Shadows trembled against the trees, stretching long and wrong. I wanted to stand, to run, but my feet were pinned by the weight of the air. Every breath felt borrowed, fragile. The radio crackled again, voices overlapping, one sharp, clear. Here. I could feel it pressing, heavy and unseen. Something moving just outside my vision, brushing the corners of the porch. I thought about calling out. The sound caught in my throat. Instead, I listened, felt the dust settle around me, felt the cold seep into my skin like water. The fog shifted. Footsteps, soft, deliberate, moved along the roof above. A shadow flickered along the eaves. Gone before I could track it. The hum under my ribs grew quieter, slower, pulsing like a heartbeat. I told myself it was nothing. I had to, but the footprints returned. 1, 2, 3, circling again. I stared at them, counting silently. None led away. None led back. Just circles. I realized the radio had gone silent. No static. No whispers. Only the cold, the fog, the faint smell of wet wood. The hum lingered under my skin, soft and insistent. A breeze rustled the leaves. Something brushed my shoulder. I didn't turn. I couldn't. The footprints faded. The porch creaked under its own weight. I was alone. The radio lay still. The fog curled around the railings. The pale light beyond the yard flickered once. And then everything was quiet. I stayed. I couldn't leave. The air held me there, in the middle of the porch, with the dust and the whispers and the footprints that never were. I didn't move. I didn't breathe too loud. And somewhere, far in the static that no longer existed, a voice lingered. Waiting. The air smelled faintly of wet asphalt and rust. Fog clung to corners of the abandoned streets. Thick and slow, curling around my ankles like smoke. The street lamp ahead flickered once, twice, then pulsed weakly, a pale heartbeat against the dark. I saw it there, beneath the trembling light. A shadow, too tall to be human, but too still to be anything else. Every step I took made the pavement groan beneath my feet, and every time I blinked, the shadow moved closer. I tried to tell myself it was a trick of the light, a puddle reflecting something I wanted to see. But the air pressed against my skin, cold and unyielding, and my chest tightened. It didn't speak, not a word. Yet I could feel it, studying, waiting, measuring. I turned left, the same street, the same lamp. The shadow was there, closer. I turned right, closer. It followed every movement, without sound, without breath, without mercy. The fog thickened. I reached out to touch it once, just to see if it was real. My fingers brushed only cold mist. A shiver raced up my spine. The street lamp flickered again. The light stuttered. For a brief second, I thought I saw a face. Pale, featureless, watching. I tried to run, but the asphalt stuck to my shoes. My own footsteps were swallowed by the heavy quiet. The shadow stayed at the crossroads, a presence rooted in the intersection. It didn't chase me. Not exactly. It waited, patient, like it knew I could not leave. I breathed slowly, tasting damp air and fear. The fog whispered over my skin. Rustling leaves, dry and brittle, moved in invisible currents around me. I paused. I dared to glance behind. Nothing but mist. Then a movement, a darker pulse in the gray. The shadow shifted slightly. Not hurried, deliberate, like a predator circling the edge of a dream. Every instinct screamed to run. Every rational thought whispered it was impossible to escape. The street forked, empty in every direction. Yet the shadow waited, always at the pivot of the roads. I imagined turning my back and walking straight, pretending it wasn't there. But I could feel it, even then, a weight pressing on the back of my neck. Eyes I couldn't see, burning into the small, fragile shape of me. The lamp sputtered. The light flickered and faded. I stumbled, hands grazing the cold, damp walls of surrounding buildings. Shadows pulled around me like spilled ink. I thought of calling someone. A voice, a phone, a neighbor, but my own voice felt trapped in my throat. Even the air seemed to clutch it, unwilling to let it escape. The shadow never moved toward me, yet each time I looked, it was nearer, closer than the last. I could feel its attention, weighing, stretching, bending the space between us. I stopped. The fog wrapped my ankles. Cold seeped through my coat. I could smell smoke from something burning far away. Or maybe it was just the fog pressing a memory into me. The street lamp flared one last time. Then darkness swallowed it whole. The shadow melted into corners of the intersection. I was alone. The crossroads were empty, yet the air still felt heavy. Still waiting. I didn't run. I didn't move. I just breathed, counting each breath like a secret, small prayer, hoping it would not return, hoping it had never been there at all. But the fog carried a weight, and the shadows whispered my name. The fog arrived without warning, not like a breeze, not like a storm. It seeped along the streets, curling around my ankles. The ground swallowed itself beneath a pale gray skin. I could feel in my lungs, heavy and damp. Every step left a soft imprint that vanished almost immediately. The air smelled like wet concrete and something metallic. Streetlights glimmered through the haze, halos stretching too far, fading too fast. I thought I recognized the shape of my neighbor's fence, but it wasn't a fence. Something moved behind it, tall, impossibly still, pale. I stopped. The fog pressed closer. It whispered in the hollows of my chest, a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Soft, slow, insistent. I tried to call out. My voice sounded foreign. It didn't carry. Only my breath responded, fogging in the dim light. Shadows slid just beyond my vision. Too human, too pale. One lingered near the corner of the street. Then another, always just out of reach. I blinked. They didn't move like people. They floated, swaying in the fog's pulse. The pavement beneath me seemed to stretch. It cracked, not with noise, but with a sense that the ground itself was uneasy. Every step became heavier, though I barely moved. I remember the clock in the distance, its face glowing faintly through the gray. It ticked, but the sound was wrong. Hollow, like someone tapping on a metal came from the inside. I listened, and the tapping listened back. Fog wrapped around the corners of buildings, spilling through doorways. I saw shapes, sometimes two, sometimes a dozen. Always pale, always still. I thought they would vanish if I looked too long. They didn't. A wind tried to push the haze away. It failed. The fog clung, weaving around the street signs, crawling up walls, pooling in the gutters. It smelled faintly of iron, of rain, of old paper. And beneath it, something sweeter, decaying like faint perfume on a corpse. I felt hands brush against my sleeves. Cold, insistent, but when I spun, the fog had nothing in it. Only empty gray, curling, the shapes. I swear I saw eyes once. Not blinking, not alive. Just watching. I couldn't meet them. I couldn't stop moving. The street narrowed. Everything seemed to shrink as if the fog wanted to hold me in its belly. I counted houses. I counted the cracks in the asphalt. None of it made sense. Everything had shifted, though I had not. I crouched near a mailbox, listening. Footsteps? No, something else. Dragging itself along the wet ground. Soft, sticky, slow, close enough that I felt its rhythm on my spine. I didn't dare look up. I didn't dare breathe too fast. The fog was patient. It waits. It waits and coils around the small, alone moments. Somewhere a dog barked, or thought it did. The sound was muffled. Swallowed before it could reach me. I wondered if the dog existed, or if it was part of the haze. My shoes were wet. My socks were wet, and yet the fog seemed to soak into me deeper than water ever could. It pressed against my skin, heavy and constant. I felt a pulse in the mist, a heartbeat not my own. I heard whispers, not words, not language, just emotion, loneliness, cold, fear. I moved again. Every turn brought me to the same empty street, same shapes, same pale watchers. I began to imagine footsteps behind me, though the street was deserted. They never came closer, but they never left. A single window flickered light in the distance, warm, yellow, alive. I almost ran toward it, but something stopped me. The fog thickened, folding in on itself. The watchers pressed closer, and then, just for a moment, the street went silent. No wind, no dripping water, no heartbeat, no whisper. I blinked. The shapes were gone. Only fog remained. Dense, hungry, endless. I keep walking, feet dragging, breath shallow. The fog follows, wrapping, curling. And I know it will never leave. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever. Because the fog, it wants me to stay. And I am too alone to resist. The hallway stretched longer than I remembered. The wallpaper had faded to a pale, tired yellow, edges curling like the whispers of old secrets. At the far end, the door waited, swollen with age, a rusted handle that shivered beneath my fingers. I didn't want to touch it, yet I did. A draft sighed up from beneath, carrying a chill that sank into my chest. And then it came, a soft, uneven breathing, slow, labored, rising from the black maw of the basement. I froze. The air thickened. I could feel it, pressing in. The stale scent of mold, of forgotten things, the faint tang of damp earth and decay. My fingers lingered on the handle. A shiver ran down my arm, tiny sparks of unease crawling under my skin. I wanted to retreat. I wanted to run back to the warmth of the light behind me, but some pull, quiet and insistent, anchored me to the threshold. The door was heavier than I expected. It groaned when I pushed, a sound like old bones bending. The darkness below swallowed the weak light of the hallway. I squinted. Shapes emerged, or imagined shapes. A corner shadow that shifted. A glimmer of something pale and unmoving. I held my breath. The soft breathing grew closer, or perhaps I only thought it did, echoing off the concrete walls and empty air. I wanted to call out, but my voice was gone, dissolved in the thickness around me. One step forward. The wooden steps creaked under my weight. A metallic taste rose in my mouth. The air smelled damp, like wet stone, like rain leaking through a roof. Halfway down, I paused. The breathing stopped. Or maybe I only noticed it had stopped. The silence pressed against my ears. A hum of anticipation, a quiver of something waiting below. I leaned over the railing. The darkness seemed to ripple, like a slow tide, shadows curling at the edges of my vision. And then it came again, a breath, closer, faltering, uneven. I imagined the shape it might belong to, a figure crouched, still as carved wood, yet breathing. The floor beneath me shivered. The walls seemed to lean inward, whispering a language I could almost understand. I wanted to step back, to let the door close and seal the basement in quiet forever, but my feet betrayed me. I was drawn downward. At the bottom, my hand grazed the cold wall. Concrete, rough, real. The faintest brush of something else, soft, almost feather-like, pressed against my palm. I froze. The breathing slowed, then stopped again. Silence, and yet the pull remained. Something beneath the blackness, something waiting to be seen, to be acknowledged. I didn't move for long minutes. Just listened, felt the darkness pressing against my skin. The air, heavy and expectant. The quiet hum of the house above, so distant now, like another world. Eventually I backed up. The stairs groaned with each step. The hallway light above flickered, pale and unsure. The door closed behind me with a sigh. A soft, final exhale like the basement itself had breathed. And in that moment, even with the handle cold beneath my hand, I knew it was not finished. The darkness had only paused, waiting for the next time I would look. I walked away slowly, leaving the shadows where they belonged. But the memory of the uneven breathing lingered, softly, insistently, long after the door had shut. The street was empty. A pale light fell over cracked pavement, dust motes drifting in it. The shop sat at the corner, forgotten, its windows opaque with grime. I pushed the door. It moaned. Inside smelled of old wood and something metallic, like iron left in water. The clock sat on the counter. Its hands moved backward, slowly, deliberately, as if erasing time itself. Every tick, it made the walls hum, a low vibration that threaded through my chest, curling under my ribs. I leaned closer. The chimes began. Sharp, hollow echoes bouncing off the street outside, twisting the sound of distant footsteps, laughter, even the wind. Everything familiar warped. I reached out. Fingers brushed the wood. The air shifted, heavier, like stepping underwater. A cold draft curled around my wrists, rising up my arms. Shadows pooled in corners. They weren't still. They leaned, stretching toward me with slow patience. I pulled back. The chimes rang again. This time quieter, but closer. Each note sounded inside my chest, vibrating through my bones. I could smell something else now. Old smoke, or maybe burnt paper. It burned the back of my throat. The room had grown smaller. The hands spun faster. Backward, time unraveling in soft clicks. I watched the teacup on a shelf tremble, sliding, then stopping as if pulled by some invisible hand. I wanted to leave, but the door, I couldn't see it clearly. It had blurred, like a memory half remembered. The shadows moved again. One stretched over the counter, pausing just above my arm. I froze. A breath of cold whispered along my neck. I imagined it speaking my name, though nothing formed in sound. The chimes struck 12. Noon or midnight, I couldn't tell. Time felt meaningless. Every echo bent the world outside the shop. The streetlight outside flickered, shadows jerking against the cracked walls. I touched the clock again. This time I didn't pull away. The air wrapped tighter, pressing at my skin, threading around my fingers. The ticking grew louder and slower, and then it was all silent. I blinked. The shadows had withdrawn. The shop smelled only of dust and old wood again. But the street outside, it seemed wrong. The lamplight flickered backward, cars rolling in reverse, distant voices folding over themselves. I stumbled out. The door protested once, then stayed closed. I watched the shop shrink into shadow, the clock's chime lingering in my chest. Even now, I can hear it, soft, distant, and backward, calling me home. A memory not yet lived. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of earth and drying leaves. I walked along the edge of the cornfield, where the stalks brushed against my sleeves, soft and rough at the same time. Even in the fading light, shadows seemed thicker here, settling between the rows like liquid. A rustle, just ahead. I stopped. It wasn't the wind. The stalks bent in ways they shouldn't, and I thought I heard it. My name, softly, almost swallowed by the wind. I took a careful step. The ground was uneven, littered with husks that crumbled beneath my shoes. Another whisper, closer this time. I froze, heart dragging against my ribs, ears straining. A pale light appeared between the corn, faint and trembling. It didn't illuminate the field so much as leak into it, like the first shy touch of dawn. Shapes flickered there, tall, thin, moving against the yellowed stalks. I blinked, and they were gone. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of something damp and old, rot or rain-soaked soil. I felt it on my skin, cold and wet, as if the air itself was pressing against me. And still, the whispers came, curling around my ears, naming me again. I wanted to step back, but my feet felt glued to the soil. I tried to see between the stalks, but the light was patchy, teasing my eyes with movement just out of reach. Was it me imagining them? Or were they watching, swaying with the corn stalks, waiting? A shadow slid across the pale glow. It was slow, deliberate, like a finger tracing the edge of my vision. I held my breath. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. The rustling started in earnest then, surrounding me, rising from every direction. The stalks whispered not only my name, but fragments of things I didn't remember saying out loud. Words from long ago, from dreams I had tried to forget. I pressed my hands against my ears, but the sound seeped through anyway. Soft steps shuffled behind me, careful, patient. I didn't dare turn. The corn stalks bent closer, brushing my arms, whispering against my skin. The glow shifted again, brighter now, revealing shapes that didn't belong, taller than people, impossibly thin, faceless. One moved forward, just beyond the nearest row, and stopped. I could feel its gaze, though it had no eyes. A shiver ran up my spine, settling into my chest, heavy and cold. Silence followed, sudden and suffocating. No wind, no rustle, only my own breath, loud and shallow, breaking the emptiness. Then the whisper returned, soft, almost affectionate. I turned my head slightly, and the light winked out. I was left with the field dark now, the stalks standing still but closer than before. I moved, slow, careful, tracing the edge of the field back toward the path. Every step brought more rustling, like dozens of hands brushing against the night. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. By the time I reached the road, the field was quiet again, empty as though it had never spoken. The pale light had vanished, leaving only the memory of shapes and names that would linger under my skin. Even now, I can hear the stalks, swaying gently in the wind, whispering just out of reach. And I know that if I return, they will be waiting. The evening fog pressed against the old brick house. Cold seeped through the cracks in the window frame. I leaned closer to the wall in the narrow hallway. The bricks, they weren't just uneven. They seemed to wear. Tiny cracks, like thin lashes, formed shapes. Eyes, watching. I swallowed. The air smelled of damp mortar and old wood. A pulse ran beneath my fingers when I pressed lightly against the wall. Not just a wall. Something beneath. Something alive. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but the shapes shifted, subtle, impossible to ignore. A blink here, a glance there. Each time I turned, the eyes had moved. Or had I moved? I stepped back. The hallway stretched longer than it should. Shadows pooled, heavy and sticky, along the floorboards. Soft, almost imperceptible, a hum vibrated from the bricks. A heartbeat I wasn't sure belonged to me. I touched the wall again. It pulsed warmer now, like it was breathing, slow, patient. A faint rustling, tiny, careful, rose from the cracks. I froze. The eyes widened, not blinking anymore. Watching. Not human, not animal. Just presence. I wanted to turn away. I tried, but every glance returned me to those shifting, watching shapes. The hallway seemed to twist inward. Air thickened, pressing against my chest. A whisper? Or only the hum of stone? I knelt, closer, fingers brushing the rough surface. The wall throbbed beneath my skin. I could feel it moving, reacting. Every heartbeat. every shallow breath, mirrored by a subtle shift in the bricks. A cold draft slithered down my spine. I could almost smell it now. Earth decay, something metallic beneath. The cracks weren't just eyes. They were mouths. Tiny, silent, and I could sense them waiting. I backed away slowly. Footsteps softened against the floorboards. The eyes followed, lingering at the edge of my vision. I blinked, and the shapes melted into the shadow, only to reform when I looked again. Silence pressed against my ears. Then a twitch, a faint movement, like a hand curling beneath the bricks. Not imagined, not quite real. The wall pulsed again, slow, soft, patient. I pressed my forehead to it, drawn despite the warning. Heat from beneath, faint and steady. I could feel intention, a weight pressing into the back of my skull. The hallway narrowed further. Darkness pooled. A rustle, subtle but certain, trailed behind me. I turned. Nothing, but the eyes, they were closer now, bulging slightly from the cracks, wide, unblinking, unrelenting. I stumbled back, breathing hard. The wall's pulse slowed, almost smug. I sensed it waiting, letting me leave. For now, every step away felt heavier. The hallway groaned, settling. I paused at the doorway. The fog outside had thickened. Soft light pooled from the window, pale and trembling. The hallway behind me seemed different, longer, darker, watching. I dared one last glance. The cracks had closed, leaving only a flat, uneven wall. But I knew. I could feel it. Eyes on the wall, waiting. The window creaked. A shadow lingered, faint and slow. And then, only silence. The inn had been empty for years. Its windows were opaque with dust, the kind that makes the sun feel tired. I had come to see it in the late afternoon, when the fog rolled low across the street, soft and damp. The door shivered under my hand. Inside, the air was thick, almost sweet. A hum began under my feet, faint, as though the floor itself breathed. I stepped forward. It vibrated through my soles, rising up my legs in slow pulses. The walls seemed to lean closer, listening. Corners gathered shadows. They weren't like the shadows outside in sunlight. These bent, folded into shapes that shouldn't exist. I felt the hairs along my arms rise. The hum shifted. It wasn't constant. It crept like water through cracks, curling into the edges of the room. I imagined it could see me, or perhaps it didn't need to. The ceiling groaned, softly, almost like a sigh. I could smell the damp plaster, the metallic tang of rusting nails. Each breath felt borrowed, hesitant. I moved closer to the middle of the room. The floor beneath my toes thrummed now, a pulse in time with my own heartbeat. Shadows in the corners shivered. I thought I saw one stretch toward me, thin and deliberate, and then it was gone. A whispering air brushed past my cheek. I couldn't place words. It tasted like old pages, a library left to rot. The hum deepened. I felt it in my chest. I wanted to leave. My hands itched, my feet heavy. Yet something kept me there, somewhere between fear and fascination. I realized the shadows had multiplied, now curling along the floorboards, along the walls, almost moving independently. The faintest light from a cracked window fell across the room. It was pale, hesitant, illuminating the shapes like they were carved from smoke. I squinted, movement subtle, just at the edge of my vision. I blinked, and the shapes were still. The hum changed tone. It hummed low, almost mournful, vibrating the air in my chest and ears. I pressed my palm to the floor. The vibrations rippled into my fingers. A memory, perhaps, or something that had always been here. Pulse back. I swallowed. Footsteps, soft and uneven, echoed behind me. I spun, but the hallway remained empty. Only the hum, relentless, crawling, a slow vibration threading through everything. The walls seemed to breathe now. Edges blurred, corners softened, but the shadows stayed, patient and waiting. I traced one with my eyes. It bent at an impossible angle, recoiling, folding, and then stretching again. I realized the room itself was alive in a way I couldn't name. The hum filled my ears, a pulse, a whisper, a living thing. I dropped to my knees. It vibrated through my bones. The smell of old wood, dust, something acrid and near, pressed into my nose. My hands rested on the floor. I felt the warmth of the inn, the lingering presence of what had been and would always remain. I tried to speak. Nothing came. I was alone, and yet not alone. The hum softened, fading as the last light slipped from the cracked window. Shadows in the corners remained, patient, unmoving. I rose slowly. Every step echoed in the silence that followed, stretching longer than it should. The door was before me. I reached for it, the wood cold and real under my fingers. I pulled it open. The fog outside curled into the room, carrying the last of the hum with it. It lingered on my skin, in my hair, a quiet memory of vibration. I didn't look back, but I knew the room would always hum. The house smelled of dry dust and old wood. Sunlight fell in thin, pale lines across the floorboards. Each step stirred the quiet. I noticed the footprints first. Small, damp shapes pressed into the dust behind me. I hadn't tracked mud inside. They were too neat, too deliberate. They stopped when I did. I waited, breath shallow, heart soft and tight. Then when I moved, they shifted again, following exactly where I went. A faint whisper brushed my ears. I couldn't understand it, but it carried something sorrowful. The air felt heavier. The sunlight became muted, gray at the edges. I thought I heard soft footsteps, almost in rhythm of my own. I turned quickly. Nothing, just dust and the pale rectangles of light. The footprints remained. I walked toward the hallway. The whisper followed. A single word, or perhaps only a sigh, curling through the wooden boards. Each footfall echoed slightly, then swallowed by silence. I bent down to touch the prints. Cool, faintly damp under my fingers. No one had walked here, I told myself. And yet, the shape of toes and heels was perfect. The walls seemed closer. I could feel them breathing in time with my shallow steps. The whisper returned, closer now, almost impatient. It pressed against my skin like a cold finger. I tried to convince myself it was memory, a trick of the sun, the dust. But the footprints, they didn't lie. They mirrored me, perfectly, mockingly. I walked faster. The prints followed, not just behind, but alongside now. I imagined them touching me. Cold impressions, pressing through the floor, through the soles of my shoes. I stopped. The footprint stopped. A strange pause, as though the house itself was holding its breath. The whisper lingered, curling around my thoughts. I touched the walls, the railing. Everything was coated in dust, in time, in absence. And still, they moved when I moved. Regret crept quietly, soft as falling ash. I remembered neglecting this place. The windows I never cleaned, the floor I never swept. The footprints seemed like memory, but also accusation. I imagined someone or something had been here before, or perhaps I had been here long ago and forgotten. The whisper wasn't just behind me anymore. It floated beside me, around me, as if it had always belonged. I tried to leave. The door felt far, the hall stretching longer than I remembered. And with each step, the footprints multiplied. They filled the hallway, the corners, the edges of the room I had ignored for years. I stopped again, and for a moment, I imagined stepping backward. The prints followed, just as patiently, waiting, watching, reminding. A faint wind stirred the dust. It carried the whisper once more. Now a sigh I almost understood. I shivered, but couldn't turn away. The light shifted through the blinds, soft and gray. The footprints faded just slightly, but the whisper lingered. I stayed there for a long time, just breathing, watching the floor, feeling the presence in every line of dust. The footprints never left, and the whisper never stopped. The night was cold, the kind that seeps through old walls and into bones. A pale moon hung low, half hidden by clouds. I sat by the window upstairs. Frost had crept along the edges of the glass, delicate and slow. Outside, the wind whispered to the bare branches, dragging leaves across the yard. Then I saw it, a figure, pale, still. It stood beyond the glass, too tall for the porch, too quiet for the wind. I blinked. It didn't move. Its presence pressed against me, like the weight of 100 quiet eyes. I thought maybe it was my mind, reshaping shadows. But the frost on the window, spreading like icy fingers, proved otherwise. Each breath I drew fogged the glass, curling around the frost, hiding it and revealing it at the same time. It didn't lean, didn't shift, just waited. I couldn't tell if it was looking at me or through me. I swallowed. The air smelled faintly of wet grass and metal. A soft rustle echoed from the roof, or maybe from my own shirt against the chair. I couldn't be sure. I leaned closer. The cold nipped at my cheeks, biting through the warmth of the room. My heart drummed quietly in my ears. Then, in a blink, it was gone. The space it had filled before was empty. Only frost remained, delicate and untouched, tracing the outline of where it had stood. I pressed my hand to glass. It was cold, impossibly cold. And yet, I could feel something there, lingering in the frost, a weight that pressed against my palm without touch. I stepped back. The shadows of the room stretched long under the dim lamplight. Each one seemed to twitch, small movements at the corner of vision. I thought of how long it had been since I felt truly alone. Not alone like an empty room. Alone like someone else was breathing softly behind the veil of reality. The silence settled around me, thick and heavy. I wanted to speak, to call out, but my voice felt swallowed, drifting somewhere between the frost and the shadows. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time felt wrong. The window reflected my face, pale in the pale light, and yet something was different. I could see it again in the corner of my reflection, a shape, faint, almost remembered, and then it was gone like the moon behind clouds. I tried to hold on to the image, the memory of its stillness, but the frost had won. Only intricate white patterns remained, a cold reminder that I had not imagined it. I sank into the chair, shivering. The room smelled faintly of old wood and winter's breath. The hum of the wind became almost a voice. Soft footsteps, mine, against the floorboard sounded wrong. I closed my eyes. The pale figure hovered there, behind my lids, frozen. It didn't move. It didn't blink. And I understood. It was not here to scare. Not yet. It was just waiting. When I opened my eyes, the frost had begun to fade. The glass looked ordinary now, empty, and I was left with the cold and the ache of something lost. A sadness that pressed gently, endlessly, like a shadow resting on the chest. I left the window. The room felt bigger somehow, emptier. I could still feel it there, just beyond the glass, just beyond thought. And I knew that I would return, because some things linger patiently, quietly, until we noticed them again. The alley was narrow, damp bricks pressing on either side, pale in the streetlight. Autumn leaves clung to the cracks in the pavement, soggy and silent. A laugh curled around the walls. Soft, human at first. Then it stretched, thin, high, almost elastic, like it didn't belong to any chest. I stopped. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of wet stone and something else, something faint, metallic, clinging to the edges of my nose. Shadows flickered. Not from the street lamp. They moved in patches like someone or something was just out of sight, behind a stack of crates. I told myself it was nothing, just echoes maybe. The laugh came again, a slow, twisting thread that draped over the bricks. Each step forward pressed the silence tighter around me. Footsteps returned faintly behind, but the alley was empty. I could feel the walls leaning in, listening. A shadow darted along the edge of my vision. Quick, soft, gone when I turned. The laughter grew, but slower this time. It dragged heavy, as if each note weighed more than the last. It seeped into the cracks between the cobblestones, pooling at my shoes. The cold touched my neck. I shivered. A stale, wet smell rolled past, thick and clinging. Concrete, rain, something old. I tried to breathe quietly, to let it pass. But the laugh coiled closer, stretching its thin voice around corners. It echoed in a place it shouldn't reach. A figure, or maybe just a shape, hovered at the end of the alley, too dark to hold details. It moved just beyond vision, just enough to let me feel it watching. I froze. The air trembled. Even the wind seemed to pause, waiting. Another laugh, longer this time, dragging against the walls, scratching at my bones. It wasn't playful. It was patient. Something shifted behind the shadow. Not a shape exactly, but a movement, like air stirred by something breathing. The faintest scrape against brick, quick and deliberate. I wanted to leave. Feet heavy, heart slow, I took a step back. The alley stretched longer than it should. The end flickered like a candle flame in fog. I imagined faces pressed against the walls. Just for a second, pale shapes with hollow eyes, mouths opening and closing in the laughter's rhythm. Gone when I blinked. The static in my ears grew high-pitched, like the laugh left a trail I could almost see. A curl of sound that wrapped around my chest. I pulled my jacket closer, a thin barrier against something. I stopped. The shadows stilled. Silence swallowed the alley, but it felt heavier now, waiting. A single laugh slipped from the darkness, soft and low, and then nothing. The walls seemed empty again, but the air kept the echo. It pressed lightly against my skin, brushing my hair, whispering without words. I stepped out. The streetlight ahead felt pale, distant. The alley watched me leave. Even now, when the night is quiet, I hear it curl around corners. A laugh that doesn't belong to any one body, stretching forever. I never looked back. The fog lingered low across the field. Damp grass clung to my ankles. Even the wind felt hesitant. A fence stretched along the horizon, old and crooked. The wood was gray, warped by years of storms. But the air around it hummed. I thought it was just the wind at first. But then I heard a name, soft, almost a sigh. Another name followed. Someone I knew, someone I didn't. The words floated on the breeze, brushing my face. I could feel them tickle my skin, cold as breath in winter. Each syllable lingered, like a finger tracing my spine. I stepped closer. The fence seemed taller now, leaning toward me. Its texture was rough, splintered, yet impossibly cold, as if ice ran beneath the grain. My hand reached out. I didn't want to, but I did. The wood bit back in a way that didn't hurt. It shocked me through my bones. The names grew louder, circling, twisting around my thoughts. I tried to step back, but the ground had softened, sucked in by some unseen weight. My boots left impressions that vanished before my eyes. And still the whispering, it wasn't just names. It was laughter, too, and a soft sob, muffled, far away but close at once. The fence seemed to breathe with it. I leaned in. The cold seeped into my lungs. Every exhale felt like smoke curling upward. And in the smoke, shapes, pale faces I almost recognized. Then they shifted, eyes wide, watching. I wanted to pull back, but my fingers clung to the wood. I could feel tiny pulses, like a heartbeat trapped inside the fence. It throbbed against my touch. The whispers pressed in closer. All the names I'd ever loved. All the names I'd feared. A wind moved through the field. Rustling grass. Snapping twigs. The whispers stretched into a hum. A low vibration that shook the air around me. I wanted to cover my ears. But there was nowhere to hide from it. The sun had dipped low, though I couldn't tell through the haze. Shadows pooled beneath the fence posts. They swayed with the wind, almost like hands. Reaching, waiting. I pulled my hand back. The cold stayed, lingering on my skin. The names trailed off, carried away by a faint gust. Silence settled. Not peace, but a pause. A quiet that thrummed in my chest. I stepped away. Each footfall felt heavier than the last. The field seemed endless, stretching into a gray blur. And still behind me, the fence whispered. A single name lingered, slower than the rest. Mine. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. The hum stayed with me, soft, insistent, like a shadow brushing my shoulder. And in the distance, the fence waited, waiting for the next hand to touch its cold, ancient wood. The air was cold, heavier than it should be for early autumn. Leaves pressed against the cracked windows, scratching. Inside, dust floated like fog under the pale light of broken skylights. I stepped across the hallway. The floorboards groaned beneath me. A faint laughter trembled through the corridors, distant but near, as if memory had taken form. The lockers leaned, rusted and open. I ran my hand along one. Cold metal. A smell of old paper and chalk lingered. Then silence swallowed it. I imagined the classrooms once full of voices, small chairs scraping, pencils tapping, and somewhere in the shadow of the gym doors, I thought I saw movement. A tiny figure vanishing before I could blink. The echo of a chair sliding came again. Slow, hesitant, my heart whispered, but I stayed. I wanted to see. I wanted to remember. A hallway stretched ahead, lined with murals faded to gray. I traced a hand along one. Rough plaster. A faint giggle danced behind me, curling around my ribs. I turned. Nothing. The blackboard held smudges of chalk, long erased words. A dusty eraser rolled across the floor on its own. I froze. The hum of the radiator thrummed like a low breath. Downstairs, the library waited. Shelves sagged under forgotten books. The air smelled of mold and stories left too long. I stepped between the rows. Soft footsteps mirrored mine. I stopped. They stopped. A flash of pale light through the window caught a silhouette. Small, thin, impossibly fleeting. I blinked, and it was gone. A giggle lingered, but the shape never returned. I pressed against the doorway, trembling. The hall beyond seemed longer now, deeper. A wall of lockers whispered with the sound of brushing coats. I wanted to leave, but the memory held me. Somewhere above, a door squeaked open, then closed, slowly, echoing like a heartbeat. I touched the stairs. Cold, dust rose, tickling my nose. I imagined the children racing down them, voices bouncing against the walls, alive. And then nothing. The gym smelled of varnish and old sweat. A ball rolled, half hidden under the bleachers. I nudged it. It moved farther on its own. A shadow crossed the polished floor. I leaned against the wall. A window pane vibrated faintly as though sighing. A laugh echoed behind me, soft and uncertain. I didn't dare turn. The cafeteria chairs were scattered. I could feel them waiting, poised to scrape against the linoleum once more. A scent of old lunch meat and juice boxes clung to the air. I ran my fingers along the table. Sticky, warm, though the room was cold. Outside, branches tapped on broken glass. Inside, shadows shifted in corners I didn't want to look at. A child's whisper, fleeting, almost polite. I swallowed hard. The school seemed alive and dead at once. Memory pressing against me. A faint hum through the hallways, rising then falling. I realized I was not alone. A door at the end of the corridor swung slowly. Empty, but something moved beyond it. I held my breath. A small handprint appeared on the dusty floor, leading nowhere. I backed toward the exit, floorboards groaning, windows rattling. The echoes of laughter followed me, not cruel, just persistent. I wanted to leave, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of soft eyes watching. I stepped into the crisp air outside. The school loomed silent behind me, empty once more. But the faint giggle lingered, curling into the wind. And I knew some part of it would always wait. The fog lay heavy over the forest. Damp leaves clung to my shoes. The air smelled of earth and rot. I first saw it at the tree line. A shadow, pale still. I blinked, and it was closer. Not moving, not walking. Just closer. Closer than it should have been. The branches whispered above me. Twigs cracked under my own weight, but nothing stirred in the shadow. I stepped back. My boots sank into wet moss. The cold seeped through my socks. It tilted its head. Or maybe it didn't. I couldn't tell if the shape had ears, or just more shadow. The fog curled around the trunks, soft, muffling, almost protective, but not for me. I tried to breathe quietly, not loud enough to alert it. Yet my own lungs sounded like drums in my chest. A bird screeched somewhere distant. Then silence, so thick I could feel it pressing against my back. I blinked again. It had moved, or the air had shifted. Closer, definitely closer. I remembered the trail I had taken. Fallen branches, slick stones. I traced them with my foot, hoping it would guide me away. But the path felt smaller, narrower. The shadow at the edge of vision stretched and leaned toward me. I whispered, though no one could hear. My own voice sounded foreign, swallowed by fog and wet leaves. I tried to convince myself it was a trick. Mist, moonlight, imagination. But something in the stillness pressed against my skin like fingers. It didn't breathe, or I didn't hear it. Yet I felt it. I crouched, thinking I could hide behind a mossy stump. The fog hugged me, but it found me anyway. I could see the tips of its limbs now. Thin, wrong. They bent at angles I couldn't name. The forest floor smelled of decay. Wet bark, mushrooms crushed underfoot, and underneath, something metallic. Cold, sharp. I blinked. It was closer still. Not walking, not running, just being. I wanted to scream, wanted to turn, but my head felt heavy, pinned. The fog thickened. A single branch brushed my shoulder, and it wasn't mine. I froze. The shadow lingered. It had no face, no eyes I could see, just the sense of being watched. Time slowed. The rustling leaves, the dripping branches, all blended into a soft hum. I took a step back. Then another. The ground gave way to roots and mud. And still, the shadow leaned closer. It wasn't chasing. It didn't need to. It was already here. The wind shifted, carried the smell of wet pine and something older, something rotting, something waiting. I blinked once more, and it was gone. Or I was. Only fog remained, and the memory of its weight pressing against my skin. Cold, patient, relentless. I kept walking, silent, each step heavy, each breath shallow. I didn't look back, but I could feel in the corner of my eye, everywhere I wasn't. The forest swallowed me, and the shadow waited. The air was damp. Fog clung to the cobblestones. The church tower loomed above, still as if it had forgotten how to move. I stood beneath it, feeling the chill seep through my coat. A pulse vibrated in my chest, soft, insistent, almost like a heartbeat, but not mine. The bell it hadn't rung, yet the vibrations threaded to the ground, through my feet, into my ribs. I stepped closer, each footfall swallowed by the mist. The wooden door was cold under my fingers. Inside, silence. A hush that pressed against my eardrums, not like absence, but weight. The air felt thick, like it wanted me to inhale slowly, to notice it, to be trapped by it. I moved forward. The floorboard sighed beneath me. Shadows pooled along the walls, pale light spilling from stained glass, fractured and trembling. The vibration came again, this time higher, inside my chest. I pressed my hands to it. It was a hum that I could almost taste, metallic, coppered, bitter against my tongue that I climbed the narrow spiral stairs, each step echoing too loudly, too quickly, though the space was empty. I imagined the bell above, dormant, yet alive. And with every step, the hum followed. Or maybe it was inside me, at the top, the bell tower stretched into darkness. The rope hung slack, untouched. Dust floated in the thin shafts of light. Sparkling like tiny stars, I rested my palm against the bell. It was ice. Still, the vibrations ran along my arm. I pressed closer. The air shivered, pressing into my chest, curling around my lungs like fingers. I whispered. Nothing came back. Only the hum, deep and endless, curling into my spine that I circled it, slow, careful. The stone walls exhaled cold air. I could smell rust, old wood, a faint sweetness, like something decaying yet alive. And then I heard it, not ringing, a soft dragging, something moving above the silence that I froze. Breath caught, the hum swelled, or maybe it just did in my head. A shadow stretched across the tower, shifting impossibly, folding in on itself. I reached out, fingers brushed cold metal, not the bell, something else. I couldn't see it, couldn't hear it, except for the faintest scrape against stone, a whispering friction that made my skin prickle. The air shifted again, pressing harder, heavier. I staggered back, chest tight, every inhale tasting like iron. The bell didn't move, but I felt it, its presence, its insistence. A thought, thin and tremulous, slid into my mind. It watches when silent. I stumbled down the stairs, faster this time, but the hum didn't leave. It wrapped around me, invisible, unyielding. Footsteps behind me, or were they inside my head? Followed, always a fraction too late. The door loomed again. I pushed it open, and fog swallowed inside. The town lay quiet, as if waiting. The bell tower above stared, a frozen sentinel, yet still vibrating through the world. I wanted to turn, to look, but my limbs refused. The fog curled around my ankles, cold and damp. I tasted copper again, my own pulse echoing the silent toll. I walked on, but the hum stayed. Every shadow in the fog carried it. Every gust of wind pressed it into my chest. Even now, as I sit with the memory, I can feel it vibrating low and endless, like the bell never stopped and never will. The church stands quiet, still, but it waits, and I know I will hear it again. The alley smelled of wet brick and something faintly sour, like forgotten corners of city. Even in the pale light of early evening, the shadows seemed to linger longer than they should. I was alone. That's when I saw it. A door with no building. It stood pressed against the wall of another wall, or maybe nothing at all. The wood was old, knotted and dark, the paint peeling like scabbed skin. Metal hinges glinted faintly. I stepped closer. The air changed. It smelled of iron. Old, faintly coppery. Not blood, but something close enough to make my chest tighten. I pressed my hand to the door. Cold, it shivered under my touch. A whisper wind, or something else, brushed past my ear. I thought I saw the alley behind me stretch longer. Shadows pooled. The light thinned. The door opened. It made no sound. The darkness inside wasn't black. It was more, thicker, a place where light had forgotten how to live. I could feel it pressing against my skin. The metal smelled stronger now, curling in the back of my throat. My breath caught. I wanted to close it. I wanted to run. But something soft, patient, slid past my foot. A shadow, perhaps, or my mind reshaping the alley into something worse. I stepped inside. The door didn't resist. It wasn't a portal. It was an invitation. The floor beneath my feet felt strange. Not solid, not soft, something between. A faint rustling, like dead leaves brushing over themselves, moved from the edges of the darkness. I couldn't see it. I couldn't hear it clearly. But I felt it, and then I smelled it again. Iron, and something older, something that had waited. I wanted to touch the walls. They might have been there, or I might have imagined them. Rough, cold, the shadows whispered across my fingers. A memory came unbidden. A stairwell I never knew I'd forgotten. A corridor that led nowhere. The echo of soft footsteps behind me. But I had made none. I turned back to the door. It looked normal again. Safe, almost. The alley returned. The world resumed its slow breathing. But I couldn't leave it alone. I kept glancing over my shoulder. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward the door. Every whisper of wind seemed to call my name. I wanted to touch it again. I didn't. The air was metallic. Still, a faint hum threaded through the alley, low, almost patient. It pressed at my chest, a quiet insistence. I walked away slowly, soft footsteps matching mine, or maybe not. My heart kept pace with the shadows, which had grown longer than they should have been. The door waited, silent, patient, something behind it breathing without a sound. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of the light, a mind too long alone. But I knew it was not. The alley ended. The street opened. The night smelled of asphalt and cold air. And still, in the corners of my mind, I felt the darkness stretch back to that door. The smell of metal, sharp and waiting. A silence thicker than the night. I don't know if I'll go back. I don't know if it wants me to. But I know it is there, waiting for someone to notice. Alone in the pale light, I can still see its edges. Sharp, impossible, patient. And I know some doors shouldn't exist. The fog rolled in thick, curling around the cracked sidewalks and the edges of the old buildings. I could see my breath heavy and slow as it drifted into the damp night. Only one street lamp remained lit. Its light wavered, flickering like it couldn't decide whether to stay. Shadows clung to the edges of the glow, stretching across the empty street in impossible shapes. The air smelled faintly of wet concrete and rust. I stepped closer. Each footfall seemed louder than it should, muffled yet echoing at once. The shadows shifted, gathering at the lamp's base, bending in ways that didn't make sense. A figure stood beneath the light, pale, silent, watching. The fog swallowed the rest of it, leaving only the outline sharp and still. I wanted to look away. The street smelled colder here, like the fog had weight and pressure against my skin. but my eyes stayed fixed on that figure. Something moved behind it, subtle, slow. I couldn't tell if it was another shadow, or if the light was twisting reality around it. A hum rose faintly from the lamp, a soft vibration that seemed to press against my chest. I tried to count the shadows. They didn't make sense. Each one stretched, shrank, then stretched again. My skin prickled, goose flesh rising like the fog itself was crawling over me. The figure shifted. Just a fraction. It didn't speak. The emptiness of the street filled my ears, pressing in with a quiet, unbearable weight. A soft rustle came from behind the lamp, like something brushing against the wet leaves. I held my breath. The figure's head tilted slightly. Pale eyes, if they were eyes, glimmering in the weak light. I should have run. The fog seemed to follow me with each heartbeat. The lamp flickered violently, then steadied, leaving the figure standing as if nothing had happened. I could feel the shadows reaching, inching along the pavement toward me. The air grew thick, almost tasting of iron. Every step I took felt slower, heavier, like the night itself resisted my movement. The figure didn't move from under the light, but its presence stretched outward, touching the edges of everything around me. Even the fog seemed to avoid it, curling back in fear. A soft wind whispered through the empty streets, brushing past my ears and carrying a faint, bitter scent. I shivered. The shadows swayed in rhythm with the faint flicker of the lamp. I blinked once. When I opened my eyes, the figure was closer, though it had not moved. The fog pressed against my cheeks and lips, damp and cold, leaving a chill that burrowed deep. Silence fell like a weight. Even the hum of the lamp faded to nothing. I could hear my own heartbeat, slow, deliberate, lonely. Then, as quickly as it had come, the shadows shrank. The lamp shuddered once more and burned steady. The figure remained beneath it, pale and unwavering, watching. I didn't move. The fog held me in place. And in that last, flickering light, I understood how alone I truly was.